And with that, I would like to welcome in my panel with me here on set, senior White House reporter for NBC News Digital, Shannon Pettypiece, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Susan Page, and former Chief Communications Advisor to Paul Ryan, Brendan Buck. Joining us from Fort Worth, Texas, Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. Susan, let me start with you for the big picture here of what we just kind of ran through over the course of this week. It really does seem as though the economy is the one thing that has kept this president afloat. It's the one thing where his approval ratings are actually higher than 50%. Everything else, our polling has shown it to be lower. It seemed as though he wanted to talk about a whole wide variety of things. And then today, it's been this full court press from the administration to try to convince everybody this recession isn't happening.
Right, to say, don't be afraid of optimism, which is what Larry Kudlow said.
Over and over again.
Over and over again on Meet the Press this morning. The trouble is, that doesn't actually, I don't think Larry Kudlow saying we should be optimistic probably really drives the markets that are very nervous about what's happening with the trade war with China. And you can see why the president would be so concerned about this, because the economy is the number one thing that says he'll be reelected. Presidents who preside over robust economies get reelected in modern times. Presidents who are presiding over recessions often do not get reelected. So you can see why, of all that string of bizarre and interesting news that you ran through, the 800-point drop in the stock market was the single most important one.
Well, and Shannon, this is really how the president understands the economy, is through what's happening on the Dow. And clearly, he's trying to convince people that what they're seeing is not the case, which is a common theme for him.
Right. And at a rally this week, he said, well, you have no choice but to vote for me, because if you don't vote for me, the stock market's going to tank. Your 401k is going to go down the tube because the Democrats are socialists and they're going to destroy all this economic momentum we have. Well, one, that really is an argument that only plays with people over 50 who care about their 401ks at this point. It doesn't play to millennial and a lot of Gen X voters who are going to be the biggest voting population. But secondly, if people's 401ks are in the tube when election day comes, or if they've gone down the tube when election day comes, then that just kicks the legs out from under really one of the last arguments he has, because there's a sense that this election will come down to a decision between money or morals. You can vote for the president and your money will be good. He'll give you a job, your 401k, your stock market will look good, and you will use that to overlook some of these moral character issues that he has. That's what they're banking on. But if they don't have the money piece of that, then that whole argument falls apart.
So speaking of this, for a president who has tied so much of his political fortune to the economy, it's safe to say that this week was a real gut check. The Dow rallied on Thursday and Friday, but Wednesday's 800-point plunge was the biggest single-day drop of the year. And as concerns mount about a possible recession, the president and his advisors are reportedly worried about what an economic downturn could mean for his chances in 2020. A source close to the president put it bluntly to Axios, quote, "I'm very worried about the latest economic data. A lot of us are concerned without the narrative on the economy, he can't win." And as Shannon, of course, just mentioned, that narrative was on full display at a rally Thursday night in New Hampshire.
See, the bottom line is, I know you like me, and this room is a love fest, I know that, but you have no choice but to vote for me, because your 401ks, down the tubes, everything's going to be down the tubes. So whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me.
Brendan, how much does this matter to Republican voters that seem to be willing to support the president through thick and thin?
Well, I don't think for Republican voters it's going to matter a lot, but I think the president needs to realize that he can't just win with his own base. And I think we saw that in 2018, where we lost in the suburbs, we lost with more educated voters, we lost with women voters. And I've always thought that the economy is one place where he can make up ground. I find it sort of ironic at this point that he's now hyping the economy when we've been looking for him to do that for 2 years. And it's now not
You've been trying to talk him into doing it.
Talking him to do that. And now he feels that it's important. I do think it's important to say that we have seen a few large drops in the stock market this year, and we've had these conversations. Is a recession coming? And we've always had the rebound. So I think it's important to say, it's not necessarily certain that we're in trouble. But at some point, you could only sabotage the economy so much. And I really think that's what he's doing with this trade war. And it's not just the broader economy that is a problem for him. It is in the states that matter for him the most. It's those Midwest states that were so important for him to winning. There's a lot of farmers that are hurting as a direct result of the tariffs. And so it's not just the broader economy, it's the Midwest Rust Belt states that are most important to him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Congressman, let me ask, you're in the suburbs of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You have a sense of, obviously your district is a blue one, but there are, areas throughout the state that where we're seeing swing districts that didn't used to be swing districts, and some of these phenomenons around suburban voters kind of switching teams has played out in the Trump era. How do you see this economic news playing out with your constituents on the ground in your district?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me just say this, that President Trump inherited these good numbers from President Obama. I want to be clear about that. Everyone is saying President Trump's economy, but there were good numbers that came with him when he entered the White House in 2017. With that, yeah, absolutely. Voters in the suburbs here in Dallas-Fort Worth are very concerned. They stop me all the time when I'm out and about, asking me, what's going to change? Is the president going to finally, stop acting like he's crazy all the time? And they really do want to see a return to normalcy. What I'm sensing from them is that they're not looking for anything, extravagant or radical to happen. They just really want to get back to a place and time to where they think that the White House is a place of honor and respect, and again, and just normalcy. And that's what I'm hearing over and over again.
Yeah, Susan Page, on what the congressman was just talking about there. I mean, this really does, to Brendan's point, seem like the critical constituency heading into 2020. I mean, that plus, of course, Rust Belt voters.
Yeah. It was interesting. There was a Fox News poll this week that showed just what the congressman was saying, that by about 2-to-1, voters were looking for a return to normalcy, not let's break new ground and seek fundamental change. And that's different. Voters often want big change. There's a sense, I think, with at least some of the electorate that there's a kind of exhaustion setting in on all the drama that we see day in, day out with this White House and with this administration. And that is a force that helps a candidate like Joe Biden, who would represent kind of a return to normalcy, but not not an opportunity for big change. It was interesting that the president today went after even Fox News, which has been such a champion of his for the past 3 years, and basically said Fox News is different. He didn't call it fake news, but he seemed to be going in that direction. If the president thinks Fox News is fake news, that is news that's unfavorable to him, that also reflects something significant that I think is happening.
I think this return to normalcy it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up polling, because I think that's a very important question. Because when I've talked to the Democratic voters who switched over to Trump in 2016, one of the things they said is, listen, this whole drain the swamp, the current system isn't working for me. And this question of, do you want to go back to the Barack Obama administration? I know there were many people who were happy under the Barack Obama administration, but there were a lot of people who, again, to this Trump theme, felt left out, felt like the system wasn't working for them. Do they want to necessarily go back to a system that wasn't working for them, that they felt was left behind? Or are they willing to sort of double down and continue on this road in hopes that maybe that's their only chance of getting out of what they see as a broken system?
Well, I do see a distinction, Brendan, between a return to normalcy and a return to the Obama administration. I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. I mean, the norms that we've seen broken under President Trump are, in many ways, completely unrelated to, the policies of any particular Republican or Democrat.
Sure, yeah. It's not just going back to the way it was and pretending like this never happened. It's going back. It's making all of this stress that everybody feels in their life and the craziness, as the congressman said, go away and allow yourselves to just. It was, I think, Michael Bennett who tweeted, like, I promise that I will just. You don't have to think about me, but for every 2 weeks, I will
make America boring again.
Yeah, he said, I'll keep an eye on North Korea, and you can go and live your lives, and that's actually appealing, I think, to a lot of people because politics is so consuming, it's so vitriolic these days, and some people just are turned off by that and repelled by the persona that exists, and I think that's powerful.
Well, and that is, Susan, kind of how this president won the election in the first place, right? As the reality TV show that you couldn't look away from. Do we think people are they really tired of that? Do they really want somebody boring? Or can you not, if you're boring, can you not get anyone to vote for you?
Well, they're tuning in to him, right? I mean, he's been very successful at defining the agenda day in, day out. And when the agenda isn't something he likes, when the conversation has gone in a direction that he doesn't think is helpful to him, he has been very successful in changing the conversation to something else, just with a provocative tweet. So people do tune in. You know, we've seen that with the number of people that we get on our website, or the number of people who tune into your show. But there is also, I think, some discomfort with the tone of our politics, the quality of our conversation. When the president encouraged an ally, a close ally of ours, to bar 2 members of Congress from entering their country, the two members of the squad from going to Israel, I think that took people aback. And we talked about this economic story this week as being the most important story. I do think if you're talking about breaking norms, that was the example of the past week that represented the biggest norm breaking by this president.
Congressman, quickly before we go to break here, let me get you to weigh in on that. What's the conversation been like among the Democratic caucus this week? I realize you guys have been scattered because it's recess, but around these 2 Congress, I mean, the statement that Nancy Pelosi put out on that topic really stuck out to me, because she's essentially saying, hey, we got to rise above this and make this relationship stronger than it is through this president, while obviously, of course, expressing real concerns about what the administration did here.
Yeah, no, every member that I talked to in the Democratic caucus that I communicated with, very, very upset about what happened, about 2 members of Congress being barred. And not only that, I mean, you know, most of the pro-Israel groups that come to Washington, D.C., they really work overtime to make sure that Israel does not become a partisan topic. And the fact that President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu put Israel in the middle of a partisan political fight, a lot of people were just really upset with that, disgusted with it. And as far as Middle East policy is concerned, a lot of people think that it just really sets a very bad precedent.
And the panel is back with me now. Congressman Veasey, let me go to you on this. What is the sense among House Democrats of how serious they could be about any proposal that Mitch McConnell might be willing to put forward with Trump administration support? Is there a sense that if you are able to get something done, that that's a positive step, or is there a reluctance to trust what they are willing to do?
No, I mean, it's a reluctance to trust what they are saying that they're going to do. And the reason why is because we passed 2 pieces of legislation, two background bills, and Mitch McConnell has not acted on them yet. They're very reasonable bills. All they do is close private sales of guns and also closes the gun show loophole. And then the other bill would simply stop what happened in Charleston from being able to happen again. And they won't move on those. So they talk a lot about their red flag laws. And look, most Democrats that I talked to have said they support these laws, including colleagues. But if they're not going to move 2 reasonable pieces of legislation that aren't going to cause anyone to lose their guns or have their Second Amendment rights scaled back, then it's just really hard to trust them at all. I hope that we can do this for the American public. I mean, as a Texan, you know, we are still grieving over what happened in El Paso. It was a terrible tragedy, and we want to see something done now. It's enough talk.
Brendan Buck, it does seem clear there's no way that Mitch McConnell is going to pass the 2 bills that the congressman is talking about. It will be some sort of slimmer package. But what's your take, as somebody who's been behind the scenes in all of these, about how real this might be? I mean, Mitch McConnell does seem to be suggesting that there has been enough of a political shift that perhaps being seen doing nothing on this is actually politically untenable. Yeah, Mitch McConnell, I think, bought himself some time. He said, we're going to talk about this when we get back. I think what that really was making sure that he doesn't get too far out of President Trump. Ultimately, the one person who's going to be able to decide whether this can be done is Donald Trump. He's the only person who can go to those voters who care so passionately about this, who actually overlap quite a lot with his base, and say, we're going to do something on background checks. You don't need to worry that this is some broader conspiracy, that we're going to take your guns. And he has that type of credibility with them. The problem is the president has never shown an ability to stick to any push with Republicans, to push them to do something they haven't wanted to do. And this is going to require is going to be a persistent effort where he continues
continues to push, and his attention span is not something that we really know as one of his strengths. And I actually worry that if none of this comes together, the moment that it happened was at that rally in New Hampshire on Thursday, when he said a line that it is not people that, or it's not guns that pull the trigger, it's people. And it's not just the line that he said, it's the reaction from the crowd. They roared when he said that. And I think we need to appreciate that this president views these rallies as focus groups. They drive his decision making. And if he continues to see pushback from his voters, the people he cares most about, that they don't want to do anything on this, I think that is a really bad sign.
Yeah, I was at that New Hampshire rally, and I was going to point out the exact same thing, because that was one of the biggest applause lines of the moment when he said that, people don't pull the trigger, or, people pull the trigger, guns don't. And I felt like his shift to talking about mental institutions on the way there, I feel like I've seen that shift before after the Parkland shooting, when there seemed to be serious talk about some gun control legislation. And then all of a sudden he started talking about arming teachers in the classroom. And that whole totally shifted the conversation over another way. So I thought maybe this time it was going in a different direction, because when I talked to people at the White House on Tuesday, there was real substantive conversations going on. But then by the time we got to Thursday, I thought, well, maybe we're pulling back.
It's a familiar
I think
playbook.
what the president needs to I think what the president needs to realize, though, is that those rallies, that they're not focus groups. Those are echo chambers. Those are people that wear MAGA hats that pretty much agree with everything that he says. And if you talk to business leaders in downtown Dallas, you talk to business leaders in downtown Fort Worth that are Republicans, that belong to the NRA, that have memberships at local shooting ranges here, they will tell you that they don't think that people need to own these assault weapons. And they will tell you that we need expanded background checks. And those are the people that he lost in 2018 in the midterms. And guess what? He's going to lose them again if he does not act.
Yeah. So former Congresswoman Gabrielle Gifford's nonprofit is once again calling on Congress to act with the help of 12 military veterans. Members of the Giffords Veterans Coalition signed a letter calling for the Senate to debate legislation that would require a background check on every single gun sale. These veterans, who have all served for years in different military branches, also appeared in a new video arguing that it is and should be possible to pass common sense gun reform without violating the Second Amendment. Watch.
There are some weapons out there that, frankly, nobody should have access to. And actually, there are some people out there who should never have access to any weapons.
This isn't hunting. This isn't gun collecting. This is murder. It's killing. If we don't find a way to stop that, there's something wrong with us as a society.
And, of course, some of the faces that you might recognize in that video: General Michael Hayden, General Stan McChrystal. We've heard from some of these generals, Susan Page, before, but still kind of another piece of evidence in the sort of building case that the ground is shifting on this issue.
Well, you wouldn't think it'd be hard. 9 out of 10 Americans support background checks. That includes a majority of gun owners. It includes a majority of NRA members. It includes a majority of Republicans. And yet it is very hard in our political system at this moment to get anything passed, including background checks, despite the wide support it has. You know, you said that it would require persistent effort on the part of the president, would, and also quick action on the part of the president, because we get into next year, we're not passing any kind of gun measure. So there is a very small window over the next several weeks for this to go someplace, or else it's just over, I think, until the next election.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. All right, Susan Page, Shannon Pettypiece, Brendan Buck, and Congressman Marc Veasey, thank you guys so much for a great conversation tonight.